Alright, welcome to my iOS tutorial. Like, subscribe, share with your friends, find the repository link in the video description. Alright, so what we're going to build is this kind of simpler zoom gallery. But it's pretty cool, and it uses all the new iOS 18 features, including zoom transitions and scroll positions, and it's using some of the new APIs with tab view, and there's plenty of good stuff in there. So follow along and you might learn something. You'll certainly have fun. So without further ado, let us begin. I'm in Xcode. I'm going to create a new project, and I'm just going to select iOS and app and click next. The name I'm choosing is Sexy Zoom Gallery, and I have this organization identifier. It's chosen SwiftUI and Swift for the language. Just make sure those settings match. And I'm just going to create it on my desktop and blow it up. I'm going to upgrade the Swift version to 6. On the current version of Xcode, it starts out at 5. What we're doing works in Swift 5 or 6. So I've upgraded the Swift version to 6. And the first thing we want to create in this project is some data to drive our UI. So I'm going to right click on the root project directory and create a new file from template. And this is just going to be a regular Swift file. I will name it item. Here it is. I'm going to make a struct item. And the item gets an emoji, which is a string. It gets a name, which is a string. And it's going to get an index, which is an integer. And we're going to use that index to uniquely identify the item. So we're immediately going to make the item be identifiable. So I'm going to make an extension for item, where it is identifiable, and I'm going to make a var id, which is an int, and then just return index. So now our UI will be able to loop through a list of these items. Next, I'm going to just create a global function called createItems. And you can see that AI is already awares. And this returns an array. The array is going to be of items. I'm going to create one using the AI, which has picked the ghost emoji at index 0. So that's kind of the structure for the array. The trailing comma can be there. But I've already typed in a number of them. You can obviously use your own. I would suggest doing a big enough list to really see all these items. But there we go. Just make sure, obviously, the index is different for each one. And really, they should go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, blah, 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 so on and so forth. The next thing I want is a view to render one of these in a list. So I'm going to go new file from template again, SwiftUI view, and this will be list cell view. And for the list cell view, I want to use an item. So I'm going to say let item be an item. The preview might now have a little bit of trouble here. Instead of doing one single cell for the preview, I'm gonna make the preview be a whole scroll view. So I'm gonna just put a scroll view in the preview and put a lazy V stack and do a for each on that create items function, item in, and for each one of those items add a list cell view taking that item as an argument. So we can already see our hello world replicated many times. Let's bone out some basic structure of this. So I'm going to do a triple H stack and do an H stack with an H stack with an H stack and then with a Z stack and then with an H stack. And in the Z stack, I'm gonna put a text with item.emoji, and in this H stack, I'm gonna do a text with item.name and then a spacer. So there's a very rudimentary cell for our items. All right, now let's enhance the beauty in one clean shot. So I want a bigger emoji. I'm going to say font system size 36. And I want the title to be a little bit bigger. So I'll copy this font line to the name, but I'll make it size 22 and I'll make the weight be semi-bold. Then I want a little square around our emoji. So I'm going to say dot frame and give it a width of 52 and a height of 52 and give it a background which will be a rounded rectangle with a corner radius of 8 and a foreground style of color dot white. So it'll disappear for a second. Then I'm going to copy this background and paste it on HStack number 2. And instead of white, I'm going to do color dot blue dot mix with, and I'll mix with black by 50%. And we want a bigger sized radius. So I'm gonna bump this radius all the way up to 13. And on HStack number 3, I'm gonna add some padding. So I'm gonna say dot padding dot all by 12. And finally, on HStack number 2, I'm gonna add some horizontal padding. So I'm gonna say dot padding dot horizontal, again by 12. And then we've got more of a nice clean list. And one other thing, we want to make this text white. So I'm gonna say foreground style, color dot white. And then we've got nice white text. All right, now it's time to start linking some stuff up, and we're gonna create a view model, and we're using kind of a loose MVVM architecture. So I'm gonna say new file from template, again on the root, and choose a standard Swift file. And this I will simply name controller. And we'll use the observation framework. So this is going to be observable class controller. And we want our items. So I'm just going to say let items equals create items. And we want this controller to be used by content view. So what I usually do is start on the preview and say environment and say controller. And this is just because the previews tend to crash. So I've injected this controller into the content view. Then I'm going to make a reference to it. So I'm going to say environment, and this is going to be controller.self var controller, and that's all we need to say. Then, similar to the preview we've already done, let's kind of recreate some of that. So there's going to be a scroll view, and then a lazy vstack, and then a for each. And now we're going to loop over controller.items, item in, and we're going to add one of our list cell views, feeding it that item. This is good. Let's enhance the beauty a tiny bit more. I want a little bit less spacing, so for the lazy vstack, I'm going to change the spacing to 6. And I want a little more spacing at the top and bottom. So I'm just going to add a spacer with a frame of a height of 12, and same at the bottom. And then I'm going to make each one of these a button. So we want to click the cells. And what I find is with the AI, sometimes I can type the same thing twice and get a different result. But I'm going to use this action and label flavor and plug in list cell view as such. And I can see the preview doing a wild dance, but now these are clickable. Then let's go to our main app, our sexy Zoom Gallery app, and create a controller. Let controller equals controller. And then in the same way we've injected into the preview, we can say .environment controller. Then we want to get to that Zoom Gallery. So let's just create files for it. I'm gonna right click on the root here and create file from template, but this time selecting SwiftUI view. So first I'm gonna make Zoom Gallery view, and this will be kind of like a list or a scrolling list of Zoom Gallery page views. So let's make those also in the same way. New file from template. Zoom Gallery page view. And Zoom Gallery page view, we can start on the UI. So this is going to be similar to the cell. So it's going to get an item, which is going to be an item. And in the preview, we can now use item, and we'll just say create items 0. It'll just be the first item. And this we want to take up the whole screen, so we'll use a geometry reader, and we'll get that geometry as well. And the background, we're going to use our same cool color, our color.blue.mix with black by 50%, kind of like a navy blue. So there it is. And what we want to do is center that emoji in this geometry reader. So what I'll do is make a Z stack, and the Z stack will be the same size as the geometry. So I'm going to say .frame width geometry.size.width, and the height will be geometry.size.height. And within this Z stack, there will be another Z stack, and I'll just say .frame. For right now, I'll just make it 100 by 100, and I'll give it a background, which is a rounded rectangle of corner radius. Let's use 24, and then the foreground style of color.white, and in here we can put a text with our item.emoji, and there's a very rough view of it. All right, now let us heat up the beauty of our page just a little. So I'm going to do a little math in our view. I'm going to say var box size equals a min of geometry.size.width and geometry.size.height minus 24. And I don't want it to get too big on an iPad, so I'm going to say box size equals a min of box size and 300. And then finally let emoji size, and the AI figured it out for me, equals box size divided by 2. And now SwiftUI is having some trouble because I have this math. So I just need to add a return on the Z stack and it should be cool. Then finally, this width will be box size and height also box size. And for the emoji, the font will be a system font of size, emoji size. So we have a good full screen emoji. Now let's jump to our Zoom gallery itself. And I'm going to do what I did on content view. I'm going to first inject. So I'm going to say inject controller. And then I'm going to create this environment reference to it. So I'm going to say at environment controller.self var controller. And the simple structure of what we want here is ultimately we want a toolbar. So we're going to use a navigation stack. We're going to have a navigation stack with the tab view with a for each. And this is going to be controller.items, item in. And we can put our page, Zoom gallery page view with our item. And then we can't scroll through them until we change this tab view into page view. So we can say .tab view style, and we can do .page. And for the index display mode, we'll just say never. And one other thing, I want to give the tab view a background. So I'm going to give it that same background color, color.blue, mix with black by 50%. Now we can tab through our gallery pages. Very cool. All right. Now the question on everybody's mind, how do we get in there? So to get from content view to Zoom gallery, we need a driver. And for this driver, I'm going to jump to controller, and I'm going to make a var selected item, which will be an optional item, as such. And then I'm going to jump back to content view. And whenever we click the button, we're going to say controller.selectedItem equals item. And then we're going to ultimately show it as a sheet. So at the bottom of the scroll view, I'm going to say sheet. And for the item, it's going to be controller.selectedItem. But that isn't going to work out of the box. What we have to do is create a bindable reference to controller. So in body, we want to say bindable var controller equals controller. And now similarly to the geometry reader, we have to return the scroll view. And now in this sheet, we are going to show the zoom gallery view. And here the problem is that it wants to see the item in, and we need a binding, so we need the cache sign in front of that. So as you see, SwiftUI is not gonna always give you the right error. But this successfully gets us in and out of the zoom gallery. However, I would also like to be able to dismiss with a button. I don't think my mom would know how to get out of here. So let's add that for my mom. So on zoom gallery view, inside of the navigation stack, so on the tab view, I'm going to add a toolbar, and then a toolbar item, and the placement will be for destructive action. And this item is going to be a button, and I have to do it twice to get the autocomplete to see it. I use the action and label flavor. When we click it, we're going to say controller.selectedItem equals nil. And for the label, it's just going to be text that says done. Now we can see it up there, but we didn't really get any kind of color on our toolbar. So let's give it some color. I'm going to say .toolbar background visibility is going to be .visible for navigation bar, and .toolbar background is going to be color.black for the navigation bar. And then I'm going to make this done. I'm going to make it bold, font weight bold, and the foreground style will be color.white. So we've got a nice fat white done button. Cool. All right. Now let's add some of the iOS 18 features and start with a zoom transition. So I'm going to content view, and a zoom transition needs a namespace. So I'm going to say namespace var zoom animation namespace. Now I'm also going to use a different variable to control which page we're on aside from our selected item. The selected item is kind of more the first one we clicked, and then our mechanism for dismissal. So I'm gonna just keep track of the index of the page. So I'm gonna make a state var and call this zoom gallery index equals 0. And whenever we click the button before setting the selected item, I'm going to say zoom gallery index equals item.index. And for the zoom gallery view, we're going to link up that transition. So I'm going to say .navigation transition. And at this time, there's only one, which is zoom. So we're going to use that. The source ID is going to be zoom gallery index. And the namespace is going to be zoom animation namespace. And what we've done already is enough to give a rudimentary zoom transition. So we get a zoom straight from the middle of the screen. And what we want to do is have the zoom come from these white squares. So let's go ahead and link that up. I'm going to jump into list cell view. And I want a zoom animation namespace, and this will be a namespace.id. And now the preview is gonna need a very weird thing. So for a zoom animation namespace, what we can use here is namespace open parenthesis close parenthesis dot wrapped value. Then let's go back to content view where we're creating list cell view and pass in that namespace. So zoom animation namespace is going to be zoom animation namespace. And it looks like the auto completer is having a lot of trouble with this. And that still won't be quite enough. So we need to give it a match transition source. So let's go back to list cell view. And at the very bottom of the white square, we're going to say dot matched transition source. And the ID is going to be item.index in the namespace we just passed in, zoom animation namespace. Then if we go back to content view, we should be able to animate from the correct square. So you can see this animation coming from whichever thumb of the square we clicked on. It's always going to the heart, but still the source is correct, the white square. And what would the magic genie have us do next? Of course, make it go to the right page in the zoom gallery. So let us go to zoom gallery view, and in here we're going to make a binding to our zoom gallery index. So I'm going to say at binding var zoom gallery index of type int. Now the preview is going to have a hard time. So let's put zoom gallery index. And this one's a bit weird too. For the binding, we can do a dot constant of 0. And when we create the zoom gallery view from content view, let's pass that in. Zoom gallery index. And we can put zoom gallery index, but we're going to need the cash sign for our binding. Now we're passing that through, but we're not doing anything with it. So let's go to zoom gallery view. And on the tab view, we can give it a selection. So let's say the selection is cache zoom gallery index. That's going to get us almost opening to the right page. The only thing is that we're not giving the tab view information about how to link up these pages to this selection. So we're just going to give them a tag of item.index, and that will be enough. So let's go back to content view, and we should now see we go to the right page. There's only one bug left, and I'm gonna Command R to run the app real quick. And the bug is if, for example, we open and we scroll way ahead and we close, it didn't animate to the correct square. So we can use the new iOS18 API to do an adjustment here. So on content view, I'm going to use scroll position. So I'm going to make a state var scroll position equals a scroll position, and I'm going to use the edge flavor and start it at the top. Then the scroll view itself, we need to say dot scroll position to our scroll position. But again, this is a binding, so we put the cash sign as such. Finally, we want the scroll view to update when the zoom gallery updates. And what we're modifying is zoom gallery index. So what we can do is say dot on change of zoom gallery index. We say scroll position dot scroll to, and now we can use an ID and have the ID just be zoom gallery index. And that's it. So now when we open and, for example, go to ghost, we can scroll way ahead and even rotate, and all of the adjustment is going to be handled for us. So thank you, and please enjoy yourself.